Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Et on est revenu à notre...
Good morning, everyone. We are once again going back to our study on the mental health of Canadian producers.
Individual, Mr. Andrew Campbell, partner, Belson Farms. Welcome, Mr. Campbell. And also with Farm Management Canada, Heather Watson, Executive Director. Welcome again, Ms. Watson, to our panel. And from the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, we have Mr. Keith Curry, President. Welcome, Mr. Curry. And Mr. Peter Skanda. No, not quite. Sorry. Skanda. Okay, I'll try and do better the next time. With the Farm Policy Analyst, so welcome to our panel. So we'll start with an opening statement, 6 minutes each. You want to start, Mr. Campbell?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. It's a great honor and pleasure to sit before you today and beside these three industry leaders to talk about such an important issue that unfortunately has been hanging over farms for decades. On Sunday night, I was thinking a lot about coming from our farm in southern Ontario as I milked cows with my dad. The kids worked on their job of moving hay with a pedal tractor. The sunset provided a glorious view outside. We'd had a good run on the soybean harvest, and I was thinking ahead of this opportunity to have a positive impact. I was thinking how fortunate I was. But when it comes to mental health, many think that just being fortunate should be good enough. We get to work in and with nature's wonder. We get to work alongside our families, usually from home. We get to be our own boss. But the same things that bring us those moments of joy can obviously turn. Is nature's wonder going to keep sending so much rain in the spring that planting is delayed enough to put a drag on crop yields? Will the heat wave make cows uncomfortable enough that they'll eat less, which will lead to lower milk production? Are the 90-plus hour work weeks having an impact on my job as a father and husband? Are the decisions I make this month going to bring severe enough losses that I risk not only my future on the farm, but the retirement savings that my parents have that is almost solely tied up in that farm? Balancing the good with the challenging is no easy feat, and can so often be tied to the finances as well as the risks completely out of our control. Any issue with weather and the crop yields are impacted. Less yield equals less income, despite you paying most of the expenses up front. A trade war between two foreign countries means lower grain prices, again impacting income. Add in interest rates, trade deals, growing conditions in Brazil, milk prices in Wisconsin, meat demand in Asia, steel prices for equipment, on and on and on, and things that we can't control in agriculture, yet lead to those sleepless nights of whether or not we'll be able to write all of the checks by the end of the year. And because the stress over finances wasn't enough, tie in the guilt of whether the priority of the day should be family, farm, or off-farm work. Finally, bring in the stigma that's challenging enough in the general public, but so much more present in rural areas where the culture of a farmer is somehow supposed to be the strong and silent type, no matter what. Those are the problems. The solutions. First, I think there's quite a few things that are working. I think the fact that there are programs to help share the costs in business and financial planning, as well as succession planning, are critical. Without a plan, without someone there to help guide a family through difficult discussions, and the stress climbs exponentially. Having lived that firsthand, the ability to share those costs is one step to at least easing one of the many stressors. Strong risk management programs and insurance programs add to a relief that even if things turn tough, at least there's a backstop to help prevent a loss of the entire farm. That for us and many others includes the home we raise our families in. That adds to the pressure. And addressing the stigma, to see more and more associations and organizations, and obviously this committee bringing the issue to the forefront, lets people know they don't need to live with a facade of the strong and silent type. I hope the move to push that stigma away continues to grow. However, there are things that need work. In a world where services and communications continue to move online, we need to make sure farmers keep up. I know how beneficial it is to just simply be able to talk to the kids or a neighbor while spending days in isolation in a tractor cab. But you've got to have the connectivity in the most rural of places to help a farmer talk. Plus, there's obviously can't be a mental health professional in every rural community, especially one that has experience in farming. But to be able to have that video chat instead helps a farmer keep the discussion in the privacy of their home, something they're concerned with. Helps to save them what could be several hours of travel and makes it easier for them to accept the help, or at least easier anyway. But they need to be able to have that connectivity. Also, we all need to be mindful of our words. I've been told online that I'm a murderer. My wife's been asked why she'd ever be with someone that rapes animals. There are commercials and marketing labels that brag about their superiority in the market, saying that the way I choose to farm is leading to many of the problems people have with their health. We even have some that relentlessly push agendas pointing to my family as somehow greedy and selfish for just wanting to break even at the end of the year. When you hear that over and over and over again, you may know it's not true, but it wears on everyone in the business. Negativity breeds negativity. We can all focus on the words of encouragement and working to push people up. As one who's been through tough times, I know that that helping hand out or simply a how can I help can go so far for an individual. That being said, as a big picture, this is an issue that we can't solve in one meeting. It's going to take work, it's going to take investment. It's going to take all of us moving in the same direction if we're going to save lives, save families, and save businesses, because all of those are at stake with these discussions. Thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions a little later.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. And now I understand, Mr. Curry, you're going to give the opening statement.
Sure. Thank you.
6 minutes. Thank you.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Keith Curry, and I'm president of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. And with me today is Peter Sakanda, our lead policy advisor for farmer mental health. On behalf of the OFA and the 38,000 farm families we represent, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about this important topic. Interest in providing awareness and support for mental health challenges to our farming community is at a record high. We are very pleased the Agriculture Committee has taken the time to study this very critical issue. The OFA strongly supports developing initiatives and taking action to tackle mental health issues in our community. Ultimately, our goal is to collaborate in breaking down the barriers that exist for farmers in need, and from there, foster the development of long-term mental health resiliency. You have already heard a great deal about these barriers over the last few weeks, so I know you will appreciate that the barriers are complex, multifaceted, and interconnected. While better than it used to be, the barriers of stigma is still very much prevalent in rural communities. The perception remains that mental health challenges are one's own and not to be discussed openly. We can begin to break down this barrier with greater communication and awareness about mental health challenges within the farm community, starting the conversation and allowing individuals to comfortably seek help without fear of judgment. There is the barrier of accessing resources. We hear from our members and from current research that farmers need and appreciate resources that are tailored to the realities of farming, staffed with people that speak their language and understand the unique culture of farming. We need research, training, and mental health advocacy throughout the whole agricultural system, which would include but is not limited to farm input suppliers, farm advisors, government inspection agents, just to name a few. These are the people who are most frequently in contact with the farmers and ranchers and who farmers most often reach out to. We strongly support the work being done by Dr. Andrea Jones-Bitton and the University of Guelph, and we know from Andrea's research that women farmers are experiencing higher levels of mental distress than male farmers. Continued research, development, and distribution of materials focused on specific challenges of women farmers is also urgently needed. There are limited mental health services and practitioners in rural areas. While crisis telephone lines are important, continued research and innovation is needed into mental health services that provide timely and evidence-based services for farmers and rural residents. And finally, a critical barrier is that of sustainability. In the past, mental health programming and services have been made available for farmers during various crises due to market collapses and other tragic events. However, these interventions don't last, and support withers once the problem has subsided or the temporary funding has ended. We need a strategic, long-term, sustainable approach to tackling ongoing mental health issues. Addressing mental health cannot be limited to crisis events. It is a real issue in the day-to-day lives of farm families. A great first step in addressing many of these barriers is to establish a Canadian network for farmers' mental health, with a central hub located at the University of Guelph. Properly supported, this network would provide a long-term sustainable approach to coordinating academic and practitioner expertise from across the country, conducting participatory action, research, and knowledge transfer from those who know farmers best, and extending evidence-based peer-to-peer awareness training, programs tailored to the needs of Canadian agricultural communities. This network would create a strategic approach to addressing existing and emerging issues, providing a path towards long-term mental wellness and resilience amongst Canadian farmers. The opioid crisis. We would be negligent if we did not take the opportunity today to highlight the relationship between mental illness and the use of addictive substances. Recent research sponsored by the American Farm Bureau highlights the severe impact opioids and substance abuse is having in rural areas in the United States. We have no reason to think the potential outcomes in Canada could end up differently. There are, of course, different causal pathways explaining the relation between mental health and substance abuse problems, including using substances to self-medicate diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health illnesses. Unfortunately, access to effective, affordable treatment for substance abuse problems is often limited for rural communities. Treatment for concurrent mental health and substance abuse disorders will require a great deal of support and collaborative approach to research, training, and empirically supported interventions by specialists. Given the connection between substance abuse and mental health disorders, we urge the committee to respond to these two issues jointly. I would like to close by thanking those in our agriculture community, like Andrew, who have bravely stood up to have their voices heard and to help break the stigma. We hope their inspiring message will allow many others who are stressed, depressed, isolated, struggling, or afraid to seek the support they need. We thank the committee members for the time and look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Curry, for your statement. And now, Ms. Watson, up to 6 minutes.
Mr. Chairman and honourable members, thank you for inviting Farm Management Canada to speak before you today on matters concerning mental health in the Canadian agricultural community. We are the only national non-profit organization devoted to cultivating farm business management excellence for all farmers across Canada. We do this by developing, delivering, and connecting farmers with business skills development programming and learning opportunities. We are very pleased to speak to today's topic as we see an inherent symbiotic connection between mental health and farm business management. Farming is unique from any other business. The family home and memories are rooted, literally, on the farm and in the business. Farms cannot simply pick up and start over when times are tough, and farmers are facing risk and uncertainty like never before, from Mother Nature to changing markets and regulations, much of which is outside of their control. Public trust and social license is now putting more pressure on farmers. Stress is the human response to change, especially changes that cause worry, frustration, confusion, and a sense of losing control. Our farmers are incredibly stressed. Stress can burden us to the point where it threatens our physical and mental health. Physical signs include an increased heart rate, headaches, and trouble sleeping. Mental signs include difficulty concentrating and making decisions. Emotional include feeling anxious, agitated, or depressed. And behavioral signs including restlessness, compulsive behaviors, and cutting corners. Cutting corners increases risk, including farm safety, labor management, animal health and welfare, etc. When it comes to farming, the effects of mental health go beyond the individual. The business must keep going, the team must be led, the animals must be fed, crops managed, and the cows milked. And not only must we consider the mental health of the farm manager, but the farm team as well, and how the manager and team are equipped to support positive mental health. Hence, there is an inherent connection between mental health and managing the farm. We recently completed a study with colleagues at Agri-Food Management Excellence, looking at the impact of C-Team, which is a national farm business training program. Participants come away with a strategic business plan for their farm. We asked the alumni to report on the impacts of the program. Financial impacts including profit and debt management, business impacts including a process for decision-making, performance measurement, and network of experts, and personal impacts, including confidence in management decisions, the ability to prioritize and provide clear direction, and understand personal dynamics to better manage people and communicate. Interestingly, results revealed that in the eyes of the participants, personal impacts far outweighed business and financial impacts. Farm business management practices help reduce risk, increase certainty, and increase confidence. Through the business planning process, farmers create a vision and learn to set realistic goals. They also learn how to say no. They assess the risks and opportunities they may encounter along the way and put measures in place to mitigate and manage what is in and what is outside of their control. Planning solidifies the farm team, creating a support network including family, business partners, and advisors. The plan provides a guiding light to weather any storm. It is in this way that farm business management facilitates mental preparedness, reducing stress, and the physical, mental, emotional, and behavioral consequences thereof. We're excited to explore the connection between mental health and business management further. As a first step, we're hosting a Healthy Farmer, Healthy Farm panel discussion at our upcoming Agricultural Excellence Conference to focus on the importance of personal capacity and growth to achieve business success. We also plan to commission a national study within the next year. We will be seeking partners to provide the necessary matching funds to secure support from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. We're pleased to see mental health in the spotlight. We were part of a national initiative in 2005 to focus on mental health in agriculture. The initiative included forming a Canadian Farm Stress Network. Activities included a dedicated website and informational brochures. Proposed activities included a national stress summit, a national strategy, a national farm stress line, along with agriculturally sensitive peer-to-peer and professional support services for farmers and their families. The work of Au Coeur des Familles Agricoles in Quebec was being considered as a model for national expansion. ACFA, who I think you'll be hearing from on Thursday, provides house calls to check in on farmers before they reach crisis and a safe house for farmers and their families overcome by stress. Unfortunately, sufficient funding could not be secured to continue the work of the network. Perhaps some of the ideas could be reconsidered. So our recommendations in summary are to form a national community of practice, establish a national network to guide and monitor efforts, support the development of national endeavours including a mental health summit, farm stress line, and resource centre, support the collection and analysis of data relating to mental health incidents in rural areas. Secondly, access to relevant help. Allocate more resources to establish rural mental health workers in the field, equip mental health professionals with a better understanding of farming. Train and educate positive mental health for farmers, for themselves and managing employees, and for the employees themselves. The mental health first aid training is a great initiative. And third, recognition of youth. Half of all mental illness begins by age 14. Support initiatives geared at improving mental health support for young people. We're not afraid to say it. We believe farmers deserve special treatment. Farmers are not only feeding you, me, and the world. Farmers are the heart of our economy, environmental stewardship, public health, and community development. They need our help, and we must act. In an ever-changing and increasingly complex global marketplace, the business-savvy farmer is positioned to confront change with confidence and seize opportunity, carving out a steady path for sustainable growth and prosperity while maintaining positive mental health. Albeit a lofty goal, business skills development and training must be recognized as a catalyst for positive mental health and an essential complement to risk management. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members, and guests.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. And on that, I'd like to welcome our committee members, and we will start our questioning round. Monsieur Berthold, pour 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
6 minutes, Mr. Berthold. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome to our witnesses today. This is a subject that leads to deep reflection. At the outset, if you would allow me to point out the presence here of Fayan Najib, who is an intern at the University of Toronto.
Hope that all our discussion will help her being back in Toronto with good ideas about agriculture. So welcome. Monsieur Campbell,
Mr. Campbell, I'll start with you. I think that you put your finger on something very important. The whole set of factors that farmers have to face to manage their business. This is something that ordinary people, other people, don't just realize. So can you perhaps expand on it? Why is it harder for a farmer? Is it the temperature? Is it the climate? Is it the international markets? Why does that weigh more heavily on a farmer than a citizen who goes to work every day in a business elsewhere and does a different type of work? How do you feel when you look at the weather report, for example, on any given day?
I think is challenge number one. And I think, as you pointed out, I don't think it's necessarily one factor. I think the challenge that certainly I face, and I know others do, is that it's the compounding factors. So yes, if the weather's rainy, then we usually accept that because eventually it has to rain. But if the price is going down at the same time as the interest rate is going up, as the same time as you've got to replace a piece of equipment that's now 25% more expensive, all of those start to snowball, and eventually there gets to be one issue that's a breaking point. And I think that's really where, for each individual farmer, is probably something different, what that breaking point is. But eventually you can find that, okay, you know, the fact that this happened in their life, it probably isn't just that, it's probably everything that's been snowballed up to that point.
En ce moment, qui appelez-vous?
Well, right now, when things are going bad, who do you call?
Honestly, part of it is, okay, you sleep on it. Unfortunately, maybe you have a stiff drink at the end of the day. You know, something along those lines is one of those challenges that certainly, you know, is one of my coping mechanisms, whether it should be or not. Then there are those days when, you know, as I said before, you know, I remember we were...
Yeah. Okay, but I want to know, who do you call?
Well, that's where probably the one example would be where you know, here I am you know, trying to work some muddy ground, being more stressed, and I call the neighbor that I see doing the exact same thing across the road, and here we sit and we visit back and forth. Probably not about the crops at all. We open with that, but then we talk about the kids and and it's just something to take your mind off of. That's really the only mechanism that I've found, is that who else is doing the same stupid thing I am? Let's find out, you know, how they're coping.
Donc, si je comprends.
So if I understand, a network of farmers who face the same problems might be able to help you in this type of situation that is very difficult. Do you know what resources exist, actually, at the present time?
I could not tell you what those resources are. You know, as I say, the resources are kind of ones that we've built more in our community of, you know, just a friendly group of farmers that you kind of trust and talk back and forth with. And that's, you know, basically all we tend to have.
Mais si je comprends bien, quand il y a une crise.
Yes, but if I understand correctly, when you have a crisis, when you're in a difficult situation, all the members of your network are facing the same difficult situation and you're dealing with the same problem at the same time. So you are asking people who are as depressed as you are to deal with a depressing situation, rather.
How we do it.
Wow. Monsieur Curie, in your opinion, what is your role as association to answer this problem?
Well, I can actually speak from practical experience as well, because not only do I represent the organization, I also farm as well. And Andrew's correct. You know, we tend to bottle it in, and I'll expand a little bit on what he said, because, you know, he's working with 3 generations on his farm. I'm 8th generation on my farm. It's that sense of disappointment that we also experience, that we don't want to be failures. So we have to get past that stigma first to understand that it's okay to understand that, yes, weather plays a factor, that as farmers we're price takers, not price setters, so we are affected by markets that we have no control over, or we are affected by governments that do things that affect our market that we have no control over. So we've been working with folks like, I know Andrea Jones-Benton presented to you a couple of weeks ago. We've been working extensively with her. She represents a group of people. She's a veterinarian by trade. So the veterinarians, the feed dealers, the people that come onto your farm on a regular basis tend to be folks that our members talk to. So, you know, we're starting to reach out to those associations to say, you know, how can we work together to let our members know that it's okay to not be well? It's not your fault, it's not your problem. I have personal experience with my own daughter suffering with anxiety, has for years, and she's been dealing with that. So,
thank you,
know,
Mr.
there's a lot of places to go.
Sorry, I have to hold the time, so thank you. Perhaps you'll have a chance to finish. So don't feel bad if I cut you off.
I don't feel that. I get that at home all the time.
Okay, thank you. Monsieur Drouin pour 6 minutes.
Yes. Durand, 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair.
I attended one of your conference or speaking point at the Canadian Young Farmers Forum 2 years ago in 2017. So, and I thought the perspective that you brought with posting one picture a day and that lesson that you learned. And I'm just wondering if you have had those conversations with, you know, I would say our previous generations about the different pressures that apply to farming today and the mental stress that can cause, that can be harmful to somebody who's, you know, 10,000 miles away from somebody who's trolling them on Twitter or on Facebook. But at the same time, are young farmers reaching out to you through social media to seek, you know, saying, "Hey, I'm not feeling well today. Yeah. How's it going?"
Yeah, I actually do get quite a few messages from people who basically are being attacked online. That's probably the one that I get most common, or the messages to me, is that they've put themselves in a space to try to do their best at helping a consumer understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing on all of that. And unfortunately, you know, someone comes along and, you know, as I stated before, you know, says some, you know, pretty nasty things. And usually most people swallow that and realize, yeah, that's a troll. But then all of a sudden there's a coordinated approach by, you know, some type of an organization. And all of a sudden that one message turns into, every time you hit refresh, there's a dozen new messages telling you how terrible of a person you are. That wears on a farmer, and all of a sudden it leaves them in a pretty tough position that says, I want to do good, I want to help people understand what I'm doing. But guess what? Whether I take a picture or not, the cows are going to still milk. So do I really need to put myself out there? And so just trying to at least have that conversation in, you know, how we got through some of that, how we continue to get through some of that. You know, it's by no means, you know, any level of professional help, but, you know, hopefully at least it gets them through what usually is a tough couple of weeks.
Great, thanks. And Mr. Curry, just with regards to stigma and how we approach that conversation with farmers, I'm wondering, are you, is OFA planning on organizing or providing training to some of their OFA directors who are the regional directors, because they do interact quite often with their farmers? And we know that on the high school side, there's been some grassroots movement that have been started just to say, hey, I don't think this person is feeling well, so I'm going to connect him with that mental health specialist.
Yeah, we've actually recently done some training of our MSRs. We also have an individual who her title is capacity coordinator, who's working with our MSRs and our county federations to. We're in the early stages of it, and it is a sensitive area, so not everybody is always forthcoming on that there's a need for them, even though it's probably there. But so we're doing as much work as we can within our limited abilities to make sure that our staff are trained to at least understand or try to recognize when someone's got an issue, and perhaps then try and coordinate them with where they need to go, whether it's a family doctor or a nurse friend, you know, whoever might be a better expert in that area. But yes, we are doing that kind of work.
Thanks. And Heather, welcome to the committee. So especially recently for me, and I know the training that you provide and the sessions that you provide through your organization. I know I'm in dairy country, so I get farmers who'll call me every day saying, you know, the price of milk went down, or every month the price of milk went down. But then I also have farmers who will call me and say, you know, well, over 5 years we're doing pretty good. Over 5 years, so. It's like the stock market when my financial planner says, if you're too stressed, don't look at the stock market every day, look at it on the long term. But knowing that and the stress levels and the impacts on different farmers will absorb differently, and financial stress is, I think, a major cause. How does your organization deal with that? And do you talk about mental health when you give sessions?
Yeah, so I think inadvertently we've started talking about mental health more. I mean, perhaps we didn't call it that. We've done a lot of work on transition planning, succession planning, and we did quite a big project the last 2 years in getting generations of farmers together from the same farm and coming and learning together. So what is it that's negatively impacting the farm? What's stalling the transition process, or where are you stuck? And realizing through that, a lot of it is about, going inside yourself and thinking, okay, what am I comfortable with on a risk level, for example? What am I comfortable with, and what are my biggest fears? And then I think it's about putting measures in place to, provide some sort of certainty and some sort of, I guess, air quotes, control over what's going on. So looking at, okay, here's all the scenarios that my farm faces. Which ones can I, mitigate by putting certain practices in place, such as business planning or having regular conversations with the family or having business-focused conversations. And then, what things are out of my control, but what can I do about that? So if the weather is out of my control, I've thought about all the scenarios that I could face. I've visited what's my comfort level with this. We've planned as a farm team and as a family, what is our comfort level with this scenario? And therefore, what are our different options should this arise? So that if milk prices dive or, commodity prices shoot up, whatever it is.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Mr. McGregor for 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your testimony today. Mr. Campbell, I'd like to start with you. You mentioned in your opening statement, you were talking about the organized campaigns of negativity that go after farmers. And, social media has been both a blessing and a curse. It allows you to make that connection with many people who are in your profession. And we certainly as politicians understand the campaigns of negativity, but I think the difference is that we in some ways expect it. We know that when we take a political position, there will be people out there who disagree with us. But the difference with farmers is this is not just your job, this is who you are. It's your identity. And I think what we've heard in testimony in previous days is that I don't think there's enough understanding of the worth that farmers bring. There's sort of a disconnect between the work that farmers do and the end product that end in people's store shelves. So in the context of government being able to do collectively what we can't do individually, do you think there's something that we can recommend to the federal government in trying to promote the value of farmers, to bring that understanding to the general public, to help you out, to give you that worth?
Yeah, well, I think the conversation that I know has been, had around the table before is that public trust element. And I don't necessarily think, farmers need that recognition of, aren't you great, good for you. I don't necessarily think they're looking for that pat on the back. They're just not looking to be attacked.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what it comes down to is, are there more ways that we can build that public trust so that, a consumer, when they go to the store, chooses an item, and that's fine that they can choose, but doesn't necessarily, do it because they think that this other one's going to kill them, or this other one is going to lead to some kind of a problem. Can we just build more trust in the food system, in the agriculture community? I think that probably goes a long way for a lot of farmers.
And any practical steps that the federal government can do, like some kind of a campaign to help you out with that?
Well, probably there is, and there probably is ways to even fund ones that are already going on. There's a lot of organizations across the country that are doing that. Even commodity by commodity are trying to realize that this is a problem. So I probably think there's funding there, but I think it even goes beyond that and saying we believe in these tools, these technologies. We've got branches of government that have approved these. Whatever that is, for government to just be there and stand up and say, you know what, this is safe. We do believe in this technology. We do believe in these tools. That's a huge statement in itself.
Perfect, thank you. Mr. Curry, I'd like to move to you. So, as the representative of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, Canada's most populous province, you certainly have far more farms than I do in British Columbia. One constant we've heard is the variables that are beyond farmers' control, and certainly one thing is the weather. Last week, the IPCC released a report that shows that under our current trend, we are heading towards pretty catastrophic climate change, and we will see the effects in droughts, floods, increased frequency of storms. You know, going forward, I mean, that means that a child born today who inherits the family farm in 20 to 30 years is going to be right in the center of that. And in the context of, you know, what this is going to do for farmers' mental health, having those uncontrollable variables come with increased frequency, you know, any comments you want to offer on that particular aspect?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the weather, we've always had to deal with it. So farmers look at that as just part of doing business. I think if you go back to Andrew's comments during his presentation, it's the what happens right now that really stresses us out. You know, we know that weather's coming, but until it actually hits us, we don't assess it as being part of the problem until it hits us head on. We've been very good at adapting over time to whatever we need to adapt to, but it's as Andrew pointed out, it's a compilation of many factors, weather being one. It certainly puts the most immediate pressure on us, most stress on us, but that's just sort of the turning point from all the other stresses combined. So we're going to have to continue to work with farmers to make them understand that weather's changing. It's going to keep changing. You need to be prepared through your farm practices to be ready as you can be for those changes. And that's about as far as we can go, because we honestly don't know what Mother Nature's doing. She doesn't give us a direct line to her to let us know what's going on. So we have to try and get people ready for those changes, or ready for the fact that changes are coming, and be prepared from a mental state as well, that you need to be able to handle that.
And in the last minute that I have left, you know, how prevalent is the topic of mental health now within OFA? And just so that we're not all operating in silos, in what ways can the federal government help augment what you're already doing so that we're working together and pooling our resources?
Yeah, great question, and thank you. So it's been very prevalent of late. We've had workshops the last 2 years at our AGMs that are standing room only. We've actually had to turn people away from it who want to find out more information. Where can I go? Who can I see? Am I normal? You know, that's important for people to know that it's okay to talk about it. It's not it's an illness. It's not your fault. And so I think breaking those kind of stigmas are an important step that we can take. The work that Andrea Jones-Bitten is doing at the University of Guelph, and perhaps setting up her network, funding that would be fantastic, because now we have a central point for people to go to, and we can start from there.
Thank you,
with folks
Mr.
like Heather as well too.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Mr. Longfield for 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks everybody for coming and preparing to talk to us about this. And it's always good to have Guelph in the room. You know, Keith and Peter, thank you for coming. I want to build on what Alistair was just discussing in terms of joint jurisdiction. The OFA has sent a letter to the Ontario provincial government asking for support. The Canadian government has provided $5 billion into mental health with a health accord. We hadn't had a health accord with the provinces and territories for a long time. We now have one. Is the money getting through the province? Are we measuring success in the right way? What's the joint jurisdiction challenge we face as a federal government to be able to deliver services to your organization?
I'm going to turn to Peter.
Thank you very much. That's a great question. In terms of measuring whether or not we're successful in this area, like we mentioned in our opening statement, this is a very multifaceted, very complex issue. No two farms are the same. So what success looks like in terms of measuring how we're impacting mental health will require continued research, and that's where we're hoping, with the work with Andrea and other folks, that we can try to build a network that will coordinate and the expertise across the country, because there's a lot of people doing great work across the country, and we'd love to see that come together in a strategic, coordinated, and particularly long-term way. We want to see that happen. In the past, as we mentioned, there has been crisis intervention, but we want to see this to be a long-term effort and not a shotgun approach where there's people doing different things all over the country.
So are you working with the local health integration networks? We have the Waterloo, Wellington, Lynn, and Guelph, and in surrounding areas. Is that the strategic partner you're talking about?
That'd be certainly one we'd love to work with. From the Canadian Mental Health Commission to other folks at the University of Waterloo. There's great resources all over the country that we'd love to be able to bring together, and certainly we need to learn a lot from the agriculture standpoint, which again requires more research, and we'd love to see a better approach to that.
Great, thank you. And Andrew and Heather, maybe a joint question. I was thinking of when I started my business in 1986, and I can barely remember 1987. It was a very stressful year as I tried to get things going. I was thinking of my grandfather coming to Canada in 1920 as a blacksmith and starting up in rural Manitoba, going to all of the farms to try and get his business going. Then the 30s hit. He ended up in Brandon Sanatorium for 6 months. My grandmother had 5 kids. She's alone on the farm. And there's no income coming in. There's no social support, so they're eating squirrels and whatever they can get by with. The impact on women is something that you mentioned, Heather, in your presentation. Women are as much a part of the farm as if the man is the one that's on the field. Could you maybe comment on the impact on family? And then Andrew, just in terms of business startup, we'll get to that if we have time.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think Keith would agree on the women's side. Women are they face different challenges, and I think we do need to recognize, I wouldn't say, men don't face challenges, but they're different as well. I mean, they're holding the weight of the world on their shoulders. But on the women's side, the woman is often, and especially in transition conversations, the mediator, trying to make everything work, the family as well as the business. And so trying to keep it all together. There's lots of conversations about widows on farms as well, and the resources available to them. So I think it makes absolute sense to carve out a space for women and figure out, and maybe with the research that Peter's talking about and Keith, figure out what is mental health and women and the role in agriculture on the farm, and what does that mean. I think that's worth unpacking, because I think there's a lot there and a lot of resources we could put to that. But I do think it's a very, very specific piece we need to delve into quite deeply.
Yeah, because my wife Barb was the one that got me through my business. Now she's getting me through this next career. If you don't have stability at the home, you don't have stability, and thank you for that. And so Andrew, in terms of, I'm trying to think of my experience. It wasn't farming, but it was, I didn't have access to what happens in the markets, and I was able to at least go and find new customers, and I could charge the price I wanted to. So what you're facing is a lot of uncontrollable variables, and then you have some that you can control. There's only so many hours you can spend on the field, but working with experts to try and improve your productivity, or do you look at what you can control versus what you can't control and try and separate that in terms of stress management?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, as Heather mentioned too, just in planning some of those things that you can control, that's one thing that we did early on around our farm, was just trying to have that discussion in terms of, one, just in terms of direction, so you're all paddling in the same way, but then two, just trying to find out, okay, if you can't control the price or that, well, maybe we can control the production, maybe we can control, different areas, so how are we going to focus on that? And certainly that stresses you out a little bit, but usually you have the plan. So what I found anyway is usually it's a lot of those outside factors that stress you out the most, because you just don't know how to deal with them.
And your personal mission kind of is one of the grounding things. You're feeding Canada.
Yeah. Well, and it feels really good. But at the same time, that adds to the pressure to say, well, if I don't get all the checks written this year, then what am I going to do next year? I'm not going to be doing that. I've got to work on feeding the family.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Monsieur Breton pour 6 minutes. Thank you.
6 minutes, Mr. Breton. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for their excellent presentations. It would seem that, according to some studies, farmers are consulted very little in terms of anxiety and mental health. Ms. Watson, I'll start with you. Why is this the case, and how can we solve it?
why aren't farmers consulted more than others? Perhaps it goes back to what Andrew was saying earlier, and there's this stigma that, the strong and silent type, agriculture just keeps going. Also, 2% of the population, right? So when you're looking at priorities and you're looking at, where the major issues are in the population, oftentimes agriculture gets overlooked because it's always been there, and hopefully it always will be there because we need to eat. But I think now is the time to stand up and say, like I said in my speech, agriculture is different, farming is different, and we say that all the time, and we're not shy to say it because we do think it's completely different. As Alistair was saying before, I mean, the risks faced and the compounding risks are just something that no other sector would ever see. So I'm not sure why it hasn't been looked at before, but I'm really excited that we are looking at it now, and I think we can make some huge positive waves by addressing agriculture specifically, women in farming specifically, and just unpacking all those bits and pieces.
Monsieur Curry, auriez-vous...
Mr. Curry, would you be able to add to that? Do you have an answer?
Because we're all individual business owners and we work on the landscape, we don't interact with a lot of people. So these problems get compounded because we think we're all by ourselves all the time. We do go to the coffee shop and we brag about our new equipment and we lie about our yields and we talk about our grandkids, but we don't talk about our issues back on the farm. And I think that's part of the problem is because, outside of family, we spend so much time by ourselves. And so we don't express, we haven't felt comfortable in saying, I've got a problem. I'm under pressure here and I don't know what to do about it. And I think that's a big part of the problem. And to Heather's point, I'm so happy that now that there's actually a committee federally looking at it. We've had a lot of conversations. Twitter's been fantastic from an exposure standpoint. I don't understand the bullying aspect. If you did that across the street in the place where you work, you'd be charged with harassment, but it's okay to do it online. I don't understand why there's a difference, but we have to deal with that as well. And again, we're dealing with it on our own. So there's that individual pressure that, am I alone? We don't know.
One of my friends who's a farmer, a young farmer, mentioned to me that he went to see the doctor because he felt things weren't going well, but his doctor said, I'm going to have to take you out of your workplace. His house is on his farm, as is the case for the large majority of farm owners. He was able to stop working, if you like, but he was in his house and he heard the work going on outside of his house. He heard the tractors and so on. So it was no solution at all for him. Our farmers need to have other solutions, some other alternatives, some respite care away from the farm. But yes, he was outside of his workplace as a farmer. If you work in a business, but for a farmer, it's nearly impossible. Mr. Campbell, can you talk to me a little bit about stage 3 of triggers that might trigger stress for a farmer where things aren't going very well? As a producer, can you tell us what are the 3 major triggers that can lead to stress for a farmer?
A day is one, and certainly you talk about taking that break or taking that vacation time, or even taking the time to go out, to visit with somebody else. I mean, certainly there are times of year when there is no way I can leave the farm because the stress all I do is sit there and shake with the stress of talking about my stress with somebody else. And so certainly, that runs in, that creates one, pretty enormous challenge, is just where is that priority and what should I be doing in a day? I do think the biggest one, though, remains the financial aspect. I mean, so many of the problems that we have, whether it be weather, whether it be crop prices, whether it be price of equipment, whatever it is, always ties back to, at least in the back of my mind, to say, okay, that's going to mean less income. Okay, where am I going to find more income somewhere else, this late in the year? And so that really probably is the biggest factor for most, and probably ties with most of the issues, is that financial aspect. Is, can you make it to the end of the year and into next? And then third is probably still that, kind of, at least around our place, is still that succession, that family aspect, that family dynamic. It's really easy to say, okay, we'll separate, this is the business side and this is the personal side, so whatever you say on the business side, we won't take it personally at supper time. Well, that doesn't always work very well. And so certainly, just that ability to kind of manage the family relationship at the same time as the business relationship with the exact same people, can certainly create stress.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Merci, Monsieur Breton. Now, Mr. Shipley and Riche.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the witnesses. And I just want to say thank you to Andrew Campbell for he's a neighbor, for stepping out. That hashtag Farm365, I can only imagine the stress that comes under it when it's not just you, but your family that receive those comments that come back. Many of them coming from organizations, whether they're animal rights or those that think we're poisoning the world by growing good crops. And so that part is, I just thank you for doing it. And now you're out doing and helping us advocate as farmers and talking about fresh air media is what yours is, I guess. And so I just want to say thank you to all of you for coming out. I really do want to touch on, though, the impacts that are happening, because we talk about, we've had individuals here that have talked about the situations, and it isn't just the individuals who know. It becomes, because when you're on a farm, a few of us can remember back to the 80s, and we know very much the stress that goes on, not just the farmer, but those in the whole family. And I agree with my colleague that our wives, our spouses, carry that same load. And Heather, you've talked about the stress on women. They do carry it differently. They really do. I can't speak for everyone, but we tend to take things up here a little higher, and they tend to dig in because the kids are closer, they feel that responsibility. How do we reach out, or do we know, and Keith, you've got through OFA, organizations, so how do we reach out for professionals that are not academically just professionals, but actually professionals that have some life experience on the ground, that actually understand what some of those situations about, because maybe they've walked through them, or maybe they've had family that have walked through them. Are those people available?
En masse, no. I think we have to continue to talk about it. We have to continue to advertise that there's a desperate need for that. The question or the comment about going to the medical doctor who wanted to remove you from the farm or from the workplace is a fair one, because it happens all the time, because the medical field is not trained to deal with mental wellness. We need more input into getting training for them to understand, if I don't know how to fix it, I know where to send you to get some help. So I think we need, it's a collaborative, it's the whole system. We need resources for the farm community, but we need resources for the medical community as well. And when we combine those efforts, I think then we'll start to see the improvements we need. It's not going to happen quickly, but if we don't start, it's never going to happen. So I think, collectively we need to sit down, as Peter said earlier, we need a long-term strategic plan on how we're going to tackle this and accomplish this. And we can go to our members on the ground and have a conversation with them, but we need the medical field to be able to do the same with their colleagues as well.
Any other comments? Because I'm looking at, we understand the professional academic side. What about the use of young people that come up through 4-H, the Advanced Leadership Program, Young Farmers Forum, junior farmers? Have there been contacts and working relationships and coordinating a come alongside projects with these organizations?
I know we certainly have been reaching out both on the provincial side and on the federal side through the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, but it's all over the map yet, and so we need to really start to hunker down and figure out how we coordinate all these light voices so that we're spending the resources wisely, so that we're all going through this together and we're not trying to reinvent the wheel all over the place.
Is there something federally that we can help in that coordination through, whether it's through Ag or through Health Canada? And if there is, and that may not be a fair question to tell you right now, but if there's something that any of you can forward to us in terms of your thoughts of bringing that together, I would very much appreciate it.
I'll turn it to Heather in a minute, but I think Peter hit on starting with some research in this area. We got to have the research to understand what exactly it is we need, and then we can go forward with putting things in place.
Yeah, and I would just add quickly, I think we need a platform to keep the conversation going on a national level, but with regional integration as well. You know, somewhere where you know, the health experts and the mental health experts and the ag experts can actually come together, whether, you know, maybe it starts with a summit or something, but a place where you can come together and talk about the different pieces that we need to unpack and then come up with a strategy to address those.
And Andrew, where does your social media come in on that?
Well, I think probably just creating, you know, as Heather mentioned, just that network, I think is probably one of the really important things that we can do as that tool that is really quite easy at saying, you know, here's that resource, or at least here's that organization that will find you the resource that you need. Because I think that's the big challenge for a Young Farmers Forum, professional doctor, anybody to point out and say, you know, where do they go? Well, if we have one umbrella, maybe that's a beginning point.
So can we, as a federal government, help in the prevention side, and that being on social media? We, as a federal government, can actually promote agriculture, the healthy lifestyle. Is there? I'm not sure that we're actually doing enough of that.
Unfortunately, Mr. Shipley, we're out of time.
So if you could help us with that, that'd be great.
I'll allow that. We have a very short time. I'll allow a question maybe from Mr.
Sure.
Shipley, who's the next one.
Oh, one question. Okay. Well,
it's got to be not too
Mr.
long.
Chair, I'd like to thank you for coming here today and doing two things for us: your personal experience and how it relates to public policy. One question: I love the phrase "a symbiotic relationship" between the farm management practice and health issues. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, just, I know we're almost out of time, so just quickly, farm management brings confidence. With confidence, that helps with positive mental health, I think. Making decisions, knowing what's in your control, not in your control, and knowing you're doing the best you can with what you have. On the opposite side, you know, negative mental health or not positive mental health can cause, you know, difficulty making decisions, difficulty knowing if you're doing the right thing for the right person at the right time. So I think, you know, positive business management practices, positive mental health, not so good mental practices, mental health, not so good business practices, or not so good business practices, perhaps some negative consequences to mental health because you're not quite sure where you are and where you're going. So I'd like to focus on the win-win of the two scenarios if we can.
Thank you.
Heather, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Salido. So I want to thank the panel, Mr. Campbell for being here, Ms. Watson, and of course Mr. Curry and Mr. Saikanda. Is that closer? No? No. I'm not going to try any further. So thanks so much for being here. It'll certainly help us in our study, and yeah, thank you, and have a good, safe trip back. We shall break for 2 minutes. We're back with the next panel. Thank you. Okay, so welcome to our second hour of our study on mental health for farmers and agriculture. This second hour we have with us Mr. Murray Porteous. Welcome, Mr. Porteous, to our meeting. Past National Labour Chair, Canadian Hort Council, and Vice President, Lingwood Farms Limited. And also, we have President and Chief Executive Officer of the Mental Health Commission of Canada, Ms. Louise Bradley. Thanks for being here, Ms. Bradley. And also by teleconference, is it teleconference or telephone? By telephone, we have the President of the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipality, Mr. Ray Orb. Can you hear us, Mr. Orb?
Yes, just fine.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start the opening statement, 6 minutes. Ms. Bradley, you want to get us going on the opening statement? Thank you. 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here this morning to talk about a topic that myself and the Mental Health Commission of Canada is quite impassioned about. We have long understood that to get to the heart of addressing mental health and wellness of Canadians, we absolutely have to look beyond the healthcare sector. We need to understand that when we say mental health, it cuts across all jurisdictions, and I mean all jurisdictions, and I'd be happy to give you an example of what another country is doing in that regard. That's why the Mental Health Commission of Canada has prioritized working with unconventional partners, and chief amongst those are the workplaces. When we first began to champion the national standard for psychological health and safety in the workplace about 4 or 5 years ago, we had to get employers to reimagine the concept of what a workplace is. We also had to remind our stakeholders that workplaces don't begin and end with office buildings. They simply do not. We've done a great job at helping to support a range of workforces, from first responders to trucking companies to healthcare providers, but to help them put employee mental health on the agenda. We've had some pretty good results. So where am I going with this? Well, farmers, producers, and those mining our natural resources are equally people at work. Hard at it, in fact. Rural Canadians are some of the toughest, hardest working people anywhere in the world. But as we've seen from our efforts with first responders, being tough isn't the same as being invulnerable. So we need to step up to the plate collectively and take a look at what's happening across our farming communities. We need to give some serious thought to how we are supporting their mental health, because the challenges they face are complex and they are layered. Their chosen jobs are replete with realities most of us would find quite daunting. It's a round-the-clock job 365 days a year, and profits are reliant on the vagaries of weather, the supply chain, trade agreements, and other factors far outside the realm of their control. And there are very high levels of stress and isolation. Compound that stress with a lack, and I mean a lack, of access to mental health care. Let's remember that access to services are scant and often unavailable in most communities across this country, and that stigma is hardly a thing of the past in communities where everybody knows everyone else. These reasons just scratch the surface as to the need to examine where a pan-Canadian responsibility lies in bridging the gap that too often sees agricultural workers and producers suffering in silence before resorting to suicide. Addressing this may seem a daunting task, but back in the 70s, when Canadians were dying in car accidents, we didn't throw up our hands and say, there's really not much we can do about that, it's too hard a problem. In 1971, seat belts were made mandatory in all new cars. Legislation was enacted to make those seat belts, make sure we used those seat belts. And we've seen even stricter evolution over car seat requirements. Grassroots organizations and groups like Mothers Against Drunk Driving have lobbied hard to raise awareness about the dangers of impaired driving. These, and there are many other practical measures taken together that actually save lives. In the same way, we have to build a practical framework to address the mental health of farmers. And we need to build better broadband infrastructure. Investing in e-mental health programs is not only wise, but it is the way of the future. We should be making evidence-based distance mental health skills training like those provided by Strongest Families widely available right across the country. Taken together, these efforts would give farmers the opportunity to seek help where and when they need it, at a time that is convenient to them in the privacy of their own homes, and it can be done. We need to implement suicide prevention programs such as the one the Mental Health Commission of Canada is promoting and now doing in 3 provinces in rural sectors. It's called Roots of Hope. It addresses things like means restriction, providing resources like walk-in mental health services when it is needed, and creates groups of like-minded people to share stories and to act as peer supporters. In 2015-16, the University of Guelph had a study that was co-authored by Andrea Jones-Bitton and revealed that of the 1,000 participants engaged in agriculture, nearly 60% classified as suffering from anxiety.
Ms. Bradley, I'm going to have to ask you to conclude if you can.
So the Mental Health Commission of Canada can play a supporting role in this, and I will stop there. There are solutions, there are answers, and we do not need to have our farmers suffer and die unnecessarily. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley, and you'll have a chance with questions later
Yes,
on. Mr.
thank you.
Porteous for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for allowing me to appear here today. I've never been more nervous making a presentation. This past year has been extremely stressful. We've survived 2 tornadoes which struck 4 out of our 9 farms. I had a knee shattered in June, which I'm hoping to have back normal by January. But the worst part was undergoing an integrity audit through Employment and Workforce Development Canada. I've been involved in the Seasonal Agricultural Worker Program for many years and have represented Canada in international negotiations for the program for the past 6 years. I'm past chair of the Labour Committee for the Canadian Horticultural Council, and when the ESDC first introduced the concept of having an integrity audit process, I was very supportive of it. I said we need to have integrity in the program, we need to ensure workers are protected and people follow by the rules, and there needs to be consequences for those that do not. We get a bad reputation as agriculture when somebody doesn't comply and misuses workers. So I've been very supportive of it, but right from the start I said that integrity audit process needs to have an appeal process where you can have people who actually understand agriculture look at a situation and decide if there is a real threat or not. Secondly, it needs to be timely. In horticulture, timing is absolutely critical. In asparagus when it's hot will grow 8 inches a day. I have to harvest it between 7 and 12 inches. That means most days when it's warm we harvest every day in asparagus. Some days we harvest twice. I need to make sure we have workers available. If the government decides, like they did in my case, that you're not going to have workers, I'm out of business. That has serious impacts not only for my business but also for my family members. Last October I was informed that I was going to go through an inspection, as they called it. I thought, well, okay, they have a random audit process, that's fine. I was expecting that at some point. They're very thorough. They said, no, it's a risk-based audit. Well, right away that triggered some panic in me, because a risk-based audit means you are suspected of serious violations of the program requirements, could be suspected of, for example, sex trafficking, imprisonment of workers, non-payment of workers, violence against workers, deplorable housing conditions, any one of those things. What surprised me is they wouldn't answer when I asked them, what am I being suspected of? So I'm right in the category with all of that. My neighbors all know that I'm under inspection, so they obviously start saying, yeah, I must have done something really wrong, because that means they can stop processing your applications for workers next year. The government is so slow in working that I have to apply right now if I want workers next spring to start harvesting asparagus. Any delay in that process really screws me up. It used to take the government 10 days to process those applications. We're now talking several months for them to process them. So you add in an integrity audit process, and who knows where that end line is and if you'll even have a workforce. So when they came and said in October, we're going to do this integrity audit, I was very relieved to hear them say, we will not stop processing your application in the meantime. What I didn't know was they were lying to me. They did stop processing my application. I didn't find that out until 2 months later. Maybe I shouldn't say lying. They weren't telling me the truth. There's a difference. There's different silos within the ministry. Communication isn't really good, and one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. And when they find out, nobody has the authority to overrule anybody else. So as a farmer, you end up as a victim. So I thought, okay, I'm well organized. I'll submit everything they've required. I did that in November. I started experiencing health effects in October when they told me I was going to have an inspection. My resting heart rate has been 48 for the last 40 years up till October, and it dropped to 40, which I thought was odd. And then one night I was sitting watching TV with my wife, and I said, I don't have a pulse. And she said, oh, that's ridiculous. You know, check somewhere else. But no, I didn't have a pulse. What would happen was my heart rate started ranging between 33 to 190 on a resting rate, and then it would reset for several seconds and wouldn't restart. So I was experiencing blackouts and things like that. Anyway, we started through this process, and you don't know what you're accused of. You're guilty until you're proven innocent, because they're not going to process your application until you're cleared, which means you could be out of business. Right away, I farm in partnership with my brother-in-law and my father, and we also employ my son. My father's 81 years old. He started worrying if he's going to have enough money for his dotage when he gets old, right? So he withdrew his member loans from the company. And I can't blame him for doing that. It's a prudent thing to do. The bank, when they realized that we had no guarantee that we were going to have workers this spring, started to become nervous as well. I had to increase my operating loan. We had less working capital because my dad had withdrawn funds, and also because our business was growing. So we had to increase our operating loan. The bank required appraisal on all of our assets and then renegotiate our financing. So that was okay. That was a little bit stressful maybe, but you know, you have hope that this integrity process should go tickety-boo. There's nothing wrong here. There's nothing to look for. I was assured in December, and I'll give you a quote, you will know within days, not weeks, that you have your approval. That was the beginning of December. I received my approval about the third week of February. In the meantime, calls don't get answered, emails don't get answered. You keep going through ridiculous questions, and even Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada staff suggested you move closer to town because there's more unemployed people there to hire.
Mr. Porteous, I'm going to have to ask you to terminate, because and you'll have a chance with questions as we go on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Orb, can you still hear us?
Yes.
Okay, you have up to 6 minutes to do your opening statement. Go ahead.
Yes, I can. First of all, it's a pleasure that I'm here today, and my name is Ray Orb, and I'm president of the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities, and known as SARM. And we have been the voice of rural Saskatchewan for over 100 years and represent all of the 296 rural municipalities in our province. And as an association, we are mandated to work in agriculture, which is an important sector in our province and a way of life in this province. As an example, in going back to 1911, we reported that there were 95,000 farms in Saskatchewan. And the wheat area the crop area growing to wheat was 5.3 million acres, and in 2016, we counted 34,500 Saskatchewan farms and 11.8 million acres of wheat planted in 2016, more than double the area that was reported in 1911. So the landscape has changed over the course of the last 100 years, and with larger farms yielding more production, while at the same time having fewer farms and fewer farmers, that all has a hand in creating additional stress for producers. And farming and ranching have unique occupational hazards and stresses with strong traditions of being an independent occupation. The Agriculture Health and Safety Network, which was founded in Saskatchewan by the Canadian Centre for Health and Safety, along with SARM, and originally with 6 RMs in the province, was founded in 1988. It actually provides support to improve health and safety on the farm. And according to this Agriculture Health and Safety Network, farmers are exposed to a great deal of physical health risks, along with long, strenuous labor and poor working conditions inhibited by weather and time of day. And so, due to the nature of farming, farmers and their families are susceptible to high levels of stress, depression, anxiety, and suicide. And because of long hours in the field and unpredictable weather and often low commodity prices, they are all common concerns for producers in Saskatchewan. If you mix that, for example, with a prairie fire that destroys homes, crops, and livestock, you have the perfect recipe for stress coupled with disaster. And that's exactly what happened last year in the southern half of our province in the fall of 2017, where we saw hundreds of livestock perished and close to 35,000 hectares of pasture land that was lost in a fire that swept through Burstall and Tompkins, Saskatchewan area last October. And I had the opportunity to hear firsthand from farmers and ranchers as we toured the area to witness that devastation. I met with several ranching families that have been devastated by the grass fires, and many of them have lost a good part of their livestock herds, their pasture, and their livelihood. And when I asked how they would recover, they said they had faced adversity before, and they pulled through then, and they'd pull through now. So as an association, we hear producer frustrations about land prices, taxation policies, and lack of safety net programs impacting their operations. And as a retired farmer myself, I realize that it's impossible to alleviate all the stresses of farming and ranching, but it's imperative that we have mechanisms in place to support our producers in times of need. According to a 2016 study from the University of Guelph, Canadian farmers are more stressed than those living and working elsewhere. And the survey found that 45% of respondents had high stress, 58% of them classified with varied levels of anxiety, and 35% had depression. 40% of the respondents agreed that they would be uneasy about getting professional help, and this demonstrates that there still is a stigma associated with mental health treatment, especially in the agriculture industry. If we look at a report, How to Feed the World by 2050, it indicates by that time the world's population will reach 9.1 billion, and food production must increase by 70%. Annual cereal production needs to reach 3 billion tons, and annual meat production will need to increase by over 200 million tons. To ensure a sustainable food system, we need to ensure we have healthy producers, and we need to look at the ag industry holistically. We need to equip our producers with all the tools they require to be healthy, productive, and stressful, and this should include safety net programs that address disasters such as prairie fires as a result of extremely dry conditions. We need to have forage and pasture insurance available to farmers that are affordable and are timely enough and adequate to protect farmers from disasters. Sometimes it's also necessary that programs be modified, such as the livestock tax deferral program that permit livestock producers to spread income over a longer period of time when they are forced to sell part or all of their herds. On behalf of Saskatchewan's rural municipalities, we thank the Standing Committee for the opportunity to lend our voice to this important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Orb. Now we'll start with our question round, and to start us off, Mr. Dreeshen for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to all of the witnesses and also the witnesses that had spoken earlier. It's difficult for me to figure out exactly where to start in this. I am a farmer, and right now we have our crops under snow. When you add that, you take the regulatory burdens that are associated with it, the Canadian Revenue Agency, the added stressors that they have there. I believe, Mr. Porteous, you had mentioned about the integrity audit, and whereas you are being suspected of being something that you aren't, it's exactly the same situation with CRA and the other concerns that people have. It's just so frustrating. And so we have groups like Do More Ag that are out there talking about things, but what we need is a do no more harm from governments and other groups, anti-farm associations. The attacks that we had, and we heard that earlier, it's something that is so critical. And I just think of all of the different things, and all we're doing is, because as Canadians we'll apologize for anything, and so other people around the world, they understand that. We saw that happen in our oil and gas industry, where all of a sudden we are afraid to take our natural resources to Tidewater, where the rest of the world is filling in the gap. And so we lose because of that. Our forestry industry has had the same type of attacks with Greenpeace and so on, and our agriculture groups are having the same issues as well, as we deal with GMOs and all these non-tariff trade barriers that are associated with it. So that is the attacks, and for the people that are watching and for the members that we have here, that's the attacks that people are talking about when they say this is where the pressure is as far as agriculture is concerned. Now, Ms. Bradley, you had spoken about the need for appropriate training for mental health workers, but I believe some of the things that we heard before is that the medical profession doesn't understand. I mean, you can't go and simply say, go away from the farm, stay away for a while. That doesn't work when you live where your work is and where your family is there. So I think that becomes one of the critical things for training is to make sure that we've got a group of farm folks that have that. And you look at retired farmers, they're the ones that understand all of this. So there's a pool of people that you can also talk to and work with. So is there any strategies, Ms. Bradley, that you can think of that could allow that to be part of it? And then, Mr. Porteous, if you could just kind of, if I have enough time, to fill in some of the concerns that you have with regards to government intervention.
Yes, thank you for that question. I do think that there are strategies, in fact, and I mentioned one program that the Commission is promoting and is now running in 3 provinces, a program that's called Roots of Hope. Training is an important component of it, but you have to bear in mind it is one component. The philosophy around this particular program is that the answer lies within the community. Now, we didn't come up with this on our own. We learned from this of 22 countries in Europe and to a similar degree in Quebec, where the suicide rates dropped between 20 and 25% within 2 years. And there are specific components within that program. We currently have 3 provinces that are doing it, and they are all in rural communities.
Thank you very much. And perhaps I'm mindful of my time, so I apologize.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. I don't know any other government program that's run this way. March 1st, I received notice that ESDC, with its investigations, was telling us they were going to enter farms without the permission, knowledge, or consent of the producer, whether or not the producer was present. They would go where they wanted. They would inspect what they wanted. And later that morning, I received communication from them that they would also be seizing farmers' computers. That's when I had my heart attack.
I think the other aspect of, if I have some time, I think one of the concerns that we have is we talk about farm workers and we talk about the employees and so on and how important that is. We have all of these programs. But the person that owns that farm is also working on that farm. And so when you have situations where, and in Alberta we're at that stage now where if you have a certain number of people, well then there's a chance to do unionization. And isn't that going to help your operation? So I mean, these are the other sorts of issues that are coming at us because of government not understanding what the farm is like. And so that's one of the situation you've got. Nobody understands a 90-hour work week. When you go and tell people like that, they think you're full of it, you know, but nobody understands that that's exactly what you have to do, you know. And then they have the other added stressors. It's one thing to deal with the weather, but it's something else to have somebody say, well, hey, guess what? It's, you know, you're causing global warming, so therefore we should be taxing you a little bit more, and I'm sure that'll help. So anyway, if there's any time left, I'll let you rant along.
When I raised the concerns about food safety and biosecurity and protocols that we have to adhere by, we're told, we don't care. That's just an excuse. We're going to do our job.
Thank you.
15 seconds.
That's okay. Okay.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
need to keep my blood
Mr.
pressure.
Now, Mr. Picciolito for 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And I'd like to thank Madam Bradley, Mr. Portas, and Mr. Orb for presenting through a teleconference. I'll begin with Mr. Orb. You outlined some of the issues involved with mental health and some of the situations. Can you elaborate a little bit on what your view is for the role of municipalities, because mental health challenges is a multifaceted issue with the federal government, the provincial government, and the municipalities. So can you elaborate a little bit on what you believe municipalities can do to deal with this issue?
Yeah, and I think that's a fair question. And I mentioned that we have a lot of municipalities in a province like Saskatchewan. So those municipal council members are, you know, in direct contact with the rural people. And I think we're lobbyists in the sense that we're trying to lobby the provincial government and, in some respects, the federal government for extra. Doctors, for more doctors, for more better emergency services in rural Saskatchewan. But the trend is that the doctors, you know, and the assistants, those kind of medical labs and emergency centers, they're moving into the bigger centers, and we don't have good access to that. So in the case of a farmer suffering from mental health, he has to travel further, or she has to travel further to a city center, and that puts more stress on the farm. So this is, it's an ongoing challenge and something that we're trying to work on through the Physician Recruitment Agency in Saskatchewan. But it's really been a struggle.
Okay, thank you. Madam Bradley, you talked about a lack of access to mental health help. How can we change that? Also, I noticed that in your presentation you were cut off a little bit, so if you'd like to elaborate on other issues as well, please feel free.
Thank you very much. Yes, a lack of access to services is a huge problem amongst the farming community, amongst anybody right across Canada, but particularly in rural settings. The program that I mentioned called Roots of Hope is something that, yes, it is important to have trained professionals, but in some of the smaller communities that we are seeing that program being rolled out right now, there's a thing called peer support work, and because not everybody needs a highly paid clinician, there's a time and a place for that, but certainly having access to peer support. We have to be more innovative. We can't, a country the size of Canada, we can't build mental health clinics on every single corner. So I mentioned e-mental health, and that is where services can be accessed online or even by telephone if need be. And it has seen great success in areas within Canada as well as in other countries. And I mentioned Strongest Families, which is a huge program that can be accessed 24/7 at home. And we know that cognitive behavior therapy for anxiety and depression is not only as effective online as it is in person, sometimes even more so. And so I think we have got to rethink the way in which we are delivering services in order to get these important programs to people, particularly when they are feeling suicidal.
Now, speaking of a rethink, one theme we've heard in front of this committee over and over again, and I believe it was either Mr. Campbell or Mr. Curry said that we don't get the language of farmers, that
Yes.
the mental health industry and actually everyone involved just doesn't get it. How can we change that?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, with regard to looking at peer support, that's one way where people are definitely speaking the same language. But I mentioned we've also had a great deal of success with first responders. And I think each individual group has its own language, if you will. And so it's, in the same way that we have modified mental health first aid for veterans, for First Nations in northern communities, I think it can be adapted to the agricultural community. But the time and the effort and the money has to be put into developing that. But it can be done.
Mr. Portis, I feel for what you went through. Could you help me and the committee understand what is this audit process? I'm assuming it's from Service Canada. And
it's the integrity branch of the Employment, Workforce and Development and Labor. So it's the stopgap, if you will, for making sure that everything is done in compliance with regulations for hiring foreign workers. And I'm bringing up and discussing my case, but as National Labor Chair, I was also in contact on a regular basis with several other farmers experiencing exactly the same thing. And when they found out I was coming to appear before this committee, they suggested I not do it because they know that the government holds all the cards and ESDC could have reprisal against me and my business for speaking out, and they would not do that.
so
they wouldn't speak out.
How do we change the deck so they don't have all the cards?
Sorry?
How do we change the deck so they don't have all the cards?
Very quickly, we're basically out of time. You might have a chance. Thank you, Mr. Peschisolido, and now Mr. Alistair McGregor. 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Porteous, I'm very disturbed by the testimony that we heard from you today because this is a study on mental health, but what you went through manifested itself in physical terms, and I'm very sorry for what you went through. And I know you were nervous appearing before the committee today, but I hope you view this body as a committee of parliamentarians who are very interested in the subject, and I think we're all united in trying to find ways to make the system operate better. So in the case here, we potentially have 3 ministries involved: Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, ESDC, and Agriculture Canada. And I've dealt with the federal government for many years now. Before I was a parliamentarian, I worked for an MP as a caseworker. I have seen what happens to constituents when federal ministries are not doing their job properly. And often it's a problem of communication. They work in their individual silos. They're not aware of the holistic aspect of the problem, and I'm worried that this might be the case here. I think it's incumbent upon this committee, if the government is causing this kind of stress for farmers, that we need to fix the system, and this committee needs to send a clear message to the minister. So we understand the problem. I don't want to dwell on that. I want to move forward to constructive solutions. With all of your expertise, what recommendations can this committee make to the federal government to make the system better so that we are looking after farm workers, because that's a very valid concern, but we also want to make sure that farmers have access to that labor pool and they're not suffering the same kind of stress that you went through.
Think of 4 cases offhand are exactly the same as mine and same timing and so on. All 4 of them, when they completed the investigations, they found absolutely nothing that any of the farmers had done wrong, but they had interrupted their businesses for 4 months in that process. If there's not a major concern, and I don't believe there was in any of these, because mine wasn't as a result of a complaint, I was told by a senior official it was the senior officials themselves that registered the complaint against me. But I can't get that in writing because they're blocking the Freedom of Information requests. You need to have a system that isn't assuming you're guilty till you're proven innocent. If I was a rapist, I'd have more rights than I do as an employer, okay? Because they're assumed to be innocent till proven guilty. So that's step 1. Number 2, you have to have somebody that understands agriculture making decisions about agriculture, because they don't know what they're talking about. okay? The third thing is you have to have a goal. If the goal in Canada is really to grow the economy and grow agriculture as a major driver of the economy and grow employment, horticulture is a huge employer in agriculture. We can't get Canadians to do the volume of jobs that we need. We need a reliable workforce, and the seasonal worker program works very, very well in filling that labor gap, and it's a growing gap. So if we're really serious about the sector, and if horticulture actually matters in Canada, that needs to be a priority, and it needs to be viewed that we have to have integrity in the system, yes, but don't just destroy the system just to do a check by people who don't know what they're doing.
Thank you. Ms. Bradley, you had spoken about your experience with first responders, with veterans, members of the armed forces, and those are certainly branches that have had their own challenges approaching the stigma. You know, is there anything that you've learned from how, I've talked with first responders, and it used to be a very stoic culture, but now it's something they talk about. Any learned experiences from how you made a breakthrough in those various sectors that we can apply to agriculture?
Yes, I think each time we do an adaptation of two of our training programs, one the Working Mind and the other Mental Health First Aid, we learn something that we can pass on to the next one. But I have to say that I think my biggest learning throughout all of this over the years has been the issue of stigma. And in this case, I'm not talking about the stigma of farmers, although that is a very real thing. We have all kinds of evidence that if we put the right investment and created programs that can address the mental health of the agricultural community as well as elsewhere, that it would work. But we're not paying attention to that evidence. It leads me to believe, and we are now starting to study it more at the Commission, is the whole issue of what we are calling structural or institutional stigma. There's all kinds of evidence to demonstrate that if we did the right thing, it would work, but we simply aren't doing it. And so we have to reach a crisis, and I do believe that we are in a crisis situation right across the country in terms of suicide. Our rates have stayed the same for over a decade and now are climbing. And never mind all of the deaths by opioid overdose that are actually suicides. And yet we are not doing anything nationally. It is happening piecemeal across the country to address this crisis situation. And so I think that stigma on many different fronts has got to be addressed, because the answers are there, but we simply are not putting the time, money, and effort into developing the answers.
Thank you. I will yield my remaining 10 seconds.
Gregor, now Madame Nassif pour 6 minutes.
6 minutes, Madame Nassif. Thank you very much, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. Madame Bradley, here in Canada, we currently do not have a national strategy. Can you hear the interpretation? You are hearing the English interpretation. So, we don't currently have a national strategy here in Canada for mental health in the agricultural sector. And we do know that there are problems that the producers face, can be very, very serious and can lead to suicide. We also know that depression in general, not just for farmers, but costs Canada some $32.5 billion per year, anxiety some $7 or so billion a year. So these figures, can you tell me what proportion relates to the agricultural sector in these two areas of figures I've given you?
Figures off the top of my head, I don't know them, but we do have that information, and I would be very happy to send it on to the committee because we do have those figures. I mean, we do have a national strategy for mental health. And that was developed in 2012. And my fervent belief is that if we were able to implement the various components of that strategy, it would help all Canadians, including the agricultural community. That isn't to say that we don't need to put special efforts into the agricultural community. I think we do in the same ways we have with first responders. But the access issues in particular, the innovation that is required to provide mental health services equally applies in any rural community and in particular within the agricultural community. Does that answer your question? No.
Yes. In addition and beyond the stigmatization that we have discussed, there are problems in the area of mental health. What would you say would be other difficulties that would prevent farmers from seeking mental health aid?
We simply don't have the programs. I mentioned one program called Strongest Families, which is out of Nova Scotia. And it's actually being provided across the country in various sectors, yet there are huge communities who do not have access to it, yet the country of New Zealand does. It is a program that is for families. It's one specific example, but it's for families where children are having difficulties. And I can assure you that if there is stress and anxiety amongst parents and in their families, children are. But they are able to access those services in the privacy of their homes, so stigma isn't an issue, and they're able to do so at times that is convenient for them. So, you know, that is one example of a program that is not being provided right across the country, particularly in Ontario, and could do a great deal to help the plight of farmers with children with difficulties. And then the whole issue of e-mental health. That is another way, although I'm not aware of any particular program that is focusing simply on the agricultural community, but it could be developed. But having e-mental health is certainly a way in which people who work at very long hours, as we've heard, and at very different hours is a way of addressing that particular gap.
So beyond the problems that we know about that lead to mental health issues amongst farmers, like long working hours, foreign markets that change often, and weather conditions, are there other factors that could lead to these mental health issues in farmers?
With you, I'm not aware of any studies specifically focused on what some of the factors are in creating this. I can tell you that the isolation, the access, the poor or non-existent access to services is something that deeply impacts other populations, particularly in rural communities, and the huge stigma. We cannot overemphasize the impact that has, both in governments providing services, but also amongst rural communities themselves. One of the components of Roots of Hope that I talked about is a training program within communities, plus a campaign. And it allows people to talk and hear about mental health issues within the context of their own community.
Thank you. Mr. Longfield for 6 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you all the witnesses. I want to continue on with Ms. Bradley. We had a roundtable earlier this year with where we had a lot of organizations from across Canada come to Ottawa, something that my office had helped to coordinate. What we looked at was the connection between the Canadian Mental Health Association and Mental Health Commission of Canada and others that are working. Could you maybe give us, for our report, the role that you see the Mental Health Commission of Canada playing in terms of getting data or looking at measures of success or promoting mental health across the country? If you could do that in maybe 20 or 30 seconds, that would be wonderful.
I'll try my best. I really think that one of the key issues right now in Canada is suicide prevention. Suicide is a direct correlation between the non-existent services and the impact of not having the right services is just terrible. One of the areas that the Commission is really focusing in on right now, we have reached out again for a second time to the federal government, and we appeared before the Finance Committee just recently, and we've been going province by province. If we can tackle the issue of suicide amongst rural communities across this country, we will do a great service to Canadians, and that is definitely an issue that CMHA as well as the Commission are partnering and collaborating on together.
Great, thank you. You mentioned first responders, and last week we had a witness from Alberta who was also a volunteer firefighter. And because of his role in volunteer firefighting, he also got stressed from what he saw, and quite often first on the scene. Looking at the network of volunteer firefighters as an opportunity for us to help them and then help them help other people, is that something that's active or is something that's a future possibility?
We have actually trained thousands of first responders, including firefighters, right across the country. And it is for that specific reason. It's a self-assessment tool. It was formerly called the Road to Mental Readiness and is now called the Working Mind. And it really does address the issue of first responders having to deal with huge tragedies, including death, on an ongoing basis. Mm-hmm. And I actually had one police officer tell me that it saved his life, because when he went home to his wife and said, "I believe I'm in the orange category," she said, "No, you're not, you're in red." And he got help and it saved his life. And it was because of problems dealing with his work situation.
Right, and Mr. Orb, I can't help but thinking about Humboldt and the situation that your province has gone through with Humboldt, and how it's been pulling people together, but also that it's an ongoing issue. It's beyond the headlines. Could you give us a short update on how the province has reacted to the tragedy in Humboldt this year, and whether there's lessons the rest of the country can draw from that? Mr. Orb? Okay, I think we've...
Mr. Orb, can you hear us?
Okay, my time is ticking. If I could share my time with Mr. Breton, he's got a lot of farmers in his community. I know he supports the dairy industry, and over to you, Pierre.
Merci beaucoup, cher collègue.
Thank you very much, colleague.
Or if either in writing or some other way. Thank you. Okay, back to Pierre.
Yeah. Combien de temps me reste-t-il?
How much time do I have left? Thank you. Madame Bradley, there are American studies that confirm what we are doing today. That is that the farming sector is one of the most stressful sectors in America. Does the the Mental Health Commission have any studies of that nature here in Canada that, say, would deal with suicide and the psychological aspects of farming? Would there be an equivalent study here in Canada, equivalent to the American study that I've just mentioned?
of Canada has not engaged in any particular study of that nature. We certainly have done a great deal of work on suicide, which is something that is under-addressed in every sector across the country, and I have no reason to believe that agriculture would be any different. In fact, likely worse.
Okay.
But we have not focused on any studies in agriculture in that regard.
OK, très bien.
Thank you. I certainly appreciated hearing you talk about training, prevention, and so on with our farmers. I think personally that is one of the keys that will lead to success with our Canadian workers. As we have heard this morning from you, it's not always very clear what the situation is with farmers. People aren't aware of it. They work such long hours. I know I don't have much time left, but this has been a wonderful conversation this morning, and we have to work to help our farmers with further training. Mr. Berthold? 6 minutes, Mr. Berthold. Thank you. Mr. Porteous.
Today. It was surely difficult for you to be here, to talk about it. The fear to face now the ESDC again. I think this is kind of thing you must have in mind. But I thank you for that on behalf of all this side, and I think all of my colleagues. We all here agree that we must do something for mental health for farmers. We are in family, we are a group. All of us here want to do something. But you know what? Since the beginning of this study, I'm wondering why we don't address the bulliers more. Because a lot of people just don't know that they hurt you. They want to achieve their own goal. They want to achieve their work. But they just don't know that they will hurt you like they did. I think you have something to say about that.
Yeah, I mentioned in probably regrettable words that people who don't know what they're doing, they're good people, but they have a box to tick, right? And they don't see the overall picture. And they don't understand that taking a 3 or 4 month window out of a business puts that business in jeopardy, and the amount of stress that causes on the family and so on is horrendous. So better communication and an overall goal of what you're actually trying to accomplish that actually sees agriculture as a priority would be a big help. Yeah.
On a aussi entendu parler ce matin.
We also heard this morning talk about environmental groups and animal rights groups, people who didn't hesitate to flood social media with messages containing negative messaging for farmers. I think we're going to have to go further than just talking amongst ourselves around this table. We're going to have to look to see whether or not the networks for mental health for farmers would be able to address issues like this. There are human beings that are working there on the farm. We have to look at this issue. We seem to be forgetting that behind each vegetable, behind each piece of steak, or any other type of food we eat, there are human beings that produce it. Madame Bradley, the National Mental Health Commission hasn't necessarily done a study rather on farmers' mental health in particular, but I think that would be worthwhile. You know, this is an issue where the person who works on the farm is working there all the time, doesn't leave his business. So can't there be something specific for farmers?
is yes, there certainly can be. It has not been part of the mandate of the Mental Health Commission, but I can say it is one that we would welcome and believe that we could do something to assist in that way. But up until now, it has not been part of the mandate of the Commission.
Ma grande surprise quand j'ai parlé.
I was very surprised when I spoke with a representative of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. It led me to realize that those problems have existed for a very long time. And they are hidden, though, from view. They are not very visible to the public at large. Is this because of the social aspect? Is it because we hesitate to speak about it openly? Once we speak about things openly, the more we move towards solutions. Some people say you shouldn't talk about suicide because it's going to encourage other people to commit suicide. What do you think about that? Where are we exactly? Ms. Bradley, what should we be doing? Should we talk or should we not talk?
There's no evidence that suggests that talking to somebody if you have worries about them being suicidal actually increases. In fact, quite the opposite. It is one of the components of the program I mentioned,
Okay.
Roots of Hope.
I understand, not to talk with them, but in the media.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
That's give some publicity to this final option. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think that contagion is certainly an issue when you look at some of the First Nations communities and amongst youth, and that is a very specific area. The Commission has produced a document called Mindset, which is a guideline for reporters to report on mental health issues and in particular
Ms. Bradley,
suicide.
we're having a issue. Pardon? Too close to the microphone, so perhaps not speak too close to the microphone.
Okay.
Okay, let's try this again. Thank you.
Yes, the Commission has produced a guideline called Mindset. That is a guideline for reporters in reporting on mental. Is that better? On reporting on mental health issues and in particular suicide. There is a right way of doing this and a wrong way, and we have researched that, and there are very clear steps and ways in which for reporters to report on
Thank
this.
you, Ms. Bradley. Unfortunately that's all the time we have. So I certainly would like to thank the panel, Mr. Porteous, for talking to us today, Ms. Bradley also, and Mr. Orb. Mr. Orb, I understand, had a power outage, but we will forward your question and try and get an answer from him. And just before you leave, I have three little things I want to share. Thursday, October 18th, deadline to submit the recommendation in relation to the study of the advancement of technology in the agriculture industry that can support Canadian export. Thursday is the deadline. Friday, October, deadline to submit travel proposal for the period of January to March 2019. And Monday, there will be the draft report prepared by the analyst and will be distributed to all by email. And also, I want to thank Monsieur Berthold, le nom de votre étudiante.
The name of your student, your intern, but I'd like to thank her.
Hopefully it was helpful. Alors, merci. And you have two over there. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Okay, thank you all, and the next meeting. Adjourn.